All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining Sierra Club Iowa chapter today for our Friday Lunch and Learns. Today we have Tim from Virginia with us to talk about data centers and water impacts. So I will hand it off to him to get us into it.
Thank you, Brianna. Appreciate it. I hope everyone can hear me okay. As you mentioned, I am with the Virginia Sierra Club, so I'm actually the communications director there. So I work on all of our campaigns. There's a lot. And I just recently had the pleasure to meet Pam, who's your director, a wonderful human being, and obviously hardworking there at the Capitol today. And just telling her about the data center work, and this is how this came together. So I'm just going to do a quick short presentation about what kind of the worst case scenario of data center development looks like, because Virginia, as we'll talk about, is the data center capital of the world. So data centers, in terms of a volume and concentration, Virginia is number one by far. The second most, if you put it into categories of buckets, would be the country of China. So we have more data centers than anyone else, we have more development than anyone else, and we know all exactly the harms that comes with a lack of safeguards, which we also have pretty much a lack of that more than anyone else as well. So we'll just jump right in. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat if I can to answer questions, but I want to keep this sort of brief just to give you kind of a quick preview and then answer any questions folks might have, because I know Iowa's going through their own data center gold rush, as it were, to be there. So let's go ahead and start. Can you see this screen? I think you can. All right. All right. So I already gave myself the intro. Let's just jump right into what we'll be talking about. All right. Why does Virginia make a good case study? Kind of already talked about it. We have the most data centers than anywhere else. It's kind of bonkers how much power we've given data centers and how much leverage we've given data centers in Virginia. One of the reasons we are the most popular, since we're the crown jewel of data centers, is because of our proximity to DC. Gives us a lot of fiber network that's already built in, and a lot of infrastructure that makes digital advancement possible, as well as a lot of tax incentives. They call it a business-friendly state, which, in industry talk, that sounds pretty wonderful, but in real talk, real life impact talks, it's actually caused a lot of problems, and there's been a bit of an uprising against data centers in Virginia over the last 2 or 3 years. Um, I will mention energy a little bit because these things are huge energy suckers. One hyperscale data center, that's the type that they call the data centers that make sure that AI is possible, can use the same amount of energy as the city or the equivalent of the city of San Francisco. So that's just one building or a group of buildings that uses that much power in a small place that barely anybody works and but a lot of people live by. So, what I really want to dig in, though, in terms of the environmental side of this, is our particular impacts on land, water, air quality, and public health. Then, of course, the transparency. We have a political system that's supposed to be democratic. The only way to have a functioning version of that is by being informed. When it comes to data center development, not just in Virginia, but all across, there's a lack of transparency. So it's hard to understand what is actually going to happen as these things develop over time. All right, so mentioned this before. Data center, Virginia, the data center capital of the world. That graph on the left shows you the percentually how much energy these things use, and it's supposed to be a reflection of how many that you have. The graph on the right is how many data centers are existing in Virginia or proposed as of 2020, at the end of 2024. That map has almost more than doubled for proposed data centers. I know it looks like a bunch of scattered blocks, but if you zoom in, there's dozens in each one of those areas. So this is the future of data center development in Virginia, unless there's some important and necessary safeguards that are put in place to really kind of rein in this full-fledged assault on, especially in particular, rural America now. So that's a quick one. Let's talk quickly about water. I know that your wonderful team is at the Capitol today trying to do something with pipelines and carbon pipelines, and water is water is a very important aspect of, well, our way of life. We can't live without it. You would think that they would be, the priority would be to make sure that that's prioritized for communities. But unfortunately, just like they suck up a lot of energy, data centers have a major drinking problem. I don't want to read through the text, but I will tell you that like one hyperscale data center, the ones that make AI possible, they can take up to, and sometimes more, 5 million gallons of water per day. That's water that goes in to cool the data center, and then it just goes away, it evaporates, doesn't come back, so it's gone. These are a couple places just in Virginia from some of the proposed over the last year that will be, if they are built in the current form, that's how much water they would use. Loudoun County, which is where more data centers are than anywhere else, about 70% of the internet's traffic runs through the data centers in Loudoun County. That's how many they have. It's in Northern Virginia County. It's near DC. In 2023, they've used 1.6 billion gallons of water just just to operate and cool their facilities. Thing is, that's not just water that is undrinkable or unfit for human consumption. That's also what they call potable water. And the increase in the last 2 years of potable water to cool data centers in Loudoun County has increased by 250% just in 2 years. And what happened in the last 2 years that really exploded was ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. These things were already using a lot of water beforehand, which is cloud storage, sending email, being able to access Netflix, whatever streaming devices, having Zoom. That's one. But those are the yesterday's data centers. The new ones are all about AI, and they require so much more energy, so much more resources, and so much more maintenance and power in order to operate. If there's questions about that, I'd be happy to answer why, but let's just keep moving through. Air quality. One of the biggest concerns and least talked about things about data centers is that they almost always have backup diesel generators. In Virginia, every single one of them do. We're not talking about diesel generators that are like, on the back of a hot dog truck. I wish we were. We're talking about shipping container sized diesel generators. Why is that bad? Well, diesel releases a lot of toxic chemicals, benzene, arsenic, PM 2.5. There are things that have a horrible, horrible impact on people's health, and particularly children. It's very maddening. One data center, whether it's hyperscale or not, can have dozens of diesel generators on site. I think Amazon proposed one, I forget exactly where it was, where they wanted 250 massive diesel generators on site. And what they will say, the industry, is that they're used for emergency power only. What they don't tell you is that there's actually a lot of reasons to turn them on that aren't used for emergency power. Maintenance is one, making sure that they're working. Kind of like a car. If you don't start a car for a while, they're worried it'll break down. So they run these things. I think they have each one is permitted, each one is allowed without a permit to run 500 hours a year, and there's exceptions to that. When you build data centers, as you can see from this picture, right next to people's homes, even small amounts of diesel generation is unsafe. That one right there, that I picked this one on purpose in Northern Virginia, I think this is in Loudoun County, that is near playgrounds, schools, literally across the street from neighborhoods. When they turn those on, they can be extremely toxic and polluting for those areas. We haven't even talked about the noise, but that's a whole other thing. And in fact, there was a big scare as well in 2024 where they turned all of them on because some algorithm they were using was seeing that there was going to be a drop in energy production because during the summertime it's harder to produce energy. During the summer, people are using a lot more of it because of air conditioning and other reasons. And they turned them on without telling anyone, without getting any permission. It wasn't actually fit the criteria of emergency power. And by doing that, they almost caused a blackout for the entire region. So those people ran the risk, that community around them had the risk of not just being polluted even more, but also losing their power. So they would have lost twice because since they turned it on, it created a huge surge in the grid that almost caused the blackout they were worried about happening to them. That's something that should have safeguards in place, you would think. We don't. There's not even a regulation on how dirty the diesel generators can be. They put them into tiers. So like tier 1 is the worst. Tier 4 is the best in terms of how much pollution it lets out. There's no requirements on them in Virginia about how much dirty air these things can cause. There should be, but there isn't, and I'll get to that later. But yes, so that's what you're looking at with data centers. Again, this is a cloud storage data center. You can see how many diesel generators are on site through this. Problem is, this is a lot, but it's not as much as the new ones that they want to build all across America, particularly in Virginia, but also it seems to be happening in Iowa as well. Um, let's keep moving on. Transparency concerns. I'm sorry, I think I may have lost a slide. I did, I lost a slide, but that's okay. I'll talk a little bit more about noise in a second. Transparency concerns. Everyone in the data center industry has told us that NDAs are a requirement for a competitive advantage. To the extent of which is actually pretty miserable because it's not just every single person. Usually you have projects and only a few people who work on them sign NDAs. The way that it has manifested in Virginia, and it's actually getting more attention lately, is that one person at any county or any city can sign an NDA on behalf of the entire staff or on behalf of the entire city council or board of supervisors. And that means that even though they didn't want to, their hands were tied. So they can't be transparent with the community when we ask for things. Some of those NDAs we can find out through FOIA request, which is kind of ridiculous that you have to pay for information that the community deserves in the first place, but I digress. Um, but they can't even be forthcoming about what the scale of these things are going to use, how much waters they're going to use, how much energy they're going to use, or how loud it's going to be. We tried to pass a bill in Virginia this year to make sure that there was a little bit more transparency. It failed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that is the reality that we're facing. There are a lot of problems that could happen with these data centers, that will happen with these data centers, but we don't have access to the information. There's only been a few pieces that we've been able to find. Groups like the Sierra Club and Piedmont Environmental Council is really big on this as well. That have been able to kind of put together puzzle pieces. And so when communities go to their supervisors, even when communities go to the data center developer and they ask them these legitimate questions that are not unreasonable to ask, everyone gets to say, I don't know, or I can't talk about it. We're talking about these campuses that can use as much power as a small city or a medium-sized city, that can use millions of gallons of water a day, that can toxify the air beyond what is reasonable, and yet they don't get answers for them, even though people you would think are entitled to them. That's the power of NDAs and these. Um, so that's all part of it. I think I lost a slide between when I gave this presentation to the city of Chicago a couple weeks ago. The other side of it is noise. There's a lot of different studies that confirm that noise pollution is very not just an annoyance, but also unhealthy, in particular children during their early stages of development. Um, you can't be, at least in Virginia, I've been to data centers in rural America, in rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. If you're within 2,000 feet of a data center, you will hear it, and you will hear it all the time. The industry says we'll put up 50-foot buffers, we'll plant new trees, we'll put up walls, it doesn't matter. And then they'll try to assuage people's concern by saying it's just as loud as a person talking in a room, like as loud as I'm being right now. That's not so bad. Well, it's not so bad unless I'm in your room while you're trying to sleep. It's not so bad if you're just trying to get some peace and quiet, but literally can't escape it. And the problem with all of these factors, of course, means that your property values go down. That no one's going to want to buy a home when you have the noisiest neighbor imaginable. Nobody wants to buy a home where there's a risk of toxic air anytime the industry feels like it. Like they're worried that they won't have enough power. Nobody wants to live a home on well water when the aquifers are being drained up by, again, an industry side of things. So that was just a quick overview of data centers. As I said before, when I was invited to do this, that I mostly just wanted to have a dialogue with people who are curious about this and give them kind of an overview. So, Brianna, I don't know if there's questions in the chat about anything or if there's any questions you have, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I covered those things really quickly and then have more of a dialogue.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such good information. I can't appreciate you enough. We do have one question here so far. Are there any bills that you've seen in Virginia that maybe we should be looking out for here in Iowa?
Yes. So Everything I just told you is because of the worst case scenario of data center development. This is also, what in my experience, it always takes like 5 years before the lawmakers catch up on the urgency of issues, at least. So this was the first year we had bipartisan support. Republicans and Democrats think that this is a problem, especially the ones who represent areas that are being heavily overloaded by data centers. Um, those involved transparency, actually giving people access to the information that is important. They involved having energy efficiency. And this is the thing about the energy side of this, is that if you look at climate change, pre-AI, we had more of an optimistic outlook. Now we don't, because every utility is using data centers as an excuse to build a new fleet of fossil fuels. So Virginia has passed something called the Virginia Clean Economy Act, where we're supposed to go completely, we're supposed to get rid of carbon pollution from our power sector to 100% clean energy by 2050. Despite that, our largest utility, Dominion Energy, big fans of mine, just joking, they're not. They are proposing, I think, 6 new giant natural gas plants, and they say it's for reliability. Problem is, if you take out data centers in Virginia, our energy demand goes down. And if you look at a map of where energy demand is going up versus going down, in most of the United States, even though we are doing what we call electrification, replacing fossil fuels with an electric source, those things are a lot more energy efficient. So power demand is going down across the United States since 2020, except in areas that are data center hotspots. That's where energy is going up. Problem with that, of course, is not just a climate issue, it's an environmental justice issue because they always put them in Virginia, at least, in poor neighborhoods, poor black and brown neighborhoods. Every single time they're proposing their first giant natural data centers in an area in Chesterfield, Virginia, and it's going to be less than a mile from a community center of a neighborhood, 25% below the poverty line, predominantly black neighborhood, and they want to build it pretty much right next to their rec center. I don't know what is more fundamental than a kid being able to play outside without having to worry of getting sick, but they're building that because of data centers. So this isn't just about climate, it's also about justice. And then the side of it also is economic fairness, because every time they build one of these, our electric bills go up. So data centers are causing multiple crises across the globe, all of which are compounded to make the worst case scenario for people's lives and livelihoods and public health, and nothing's being done about it because the industry is very powerful in DC and it's very powerful in local governments. Like I said, this was the first year we had kind of a slew of bipartisan support. This was also the first year something called the Data Center Coalition, or something weird PAC thing like that, gave $200,000 or injected $200,000 into our electoral system. And look, I know elected officials will say like, well, just because I took their money doesn't mean I won't believe them, or I'll always vote the way they want me to. Sure, I'll give you that. But if they call, you're going to pick up the phone. And if you pick up the phone, that means your perspective is going to be influenced by them. That's what's most bothersome about that. Energy efficiency. Oh, sorry, went on a little tangent there about justice, but transparency is number one. Or transparency is number one issue. Energy is number one issue because they can run a lot more efficiently. But the industry's response is, I don't wanna. So they don't, and they don't like requirements. Tax incentives. I didn't get into this. Virginia gives $1.5 billion in tax incentive to the data center industry. Our bill, one of our most important ones, was, hey, don't suck up so much water, don't suck up so much energy in order to qualify for the tax credits. That died. Um, and then, of course, noise. Noise is another one. You can't go a certain level of what they call decibels, which is just, I guess, a measurement of how loud something is. And again, not a single one passed. One did pass, which was a bit of a transparency bill. That was anyone who lived within, I think, like a mile or something of that was able to have enough information about what that would look like, to give people a certain plan of like, do you really want to live by one of these things? Do you want to have the chance to move, et cetera, et cetera? Governor vetoed it. So I'm always telling groups that we cannot afford to waste time believing that politicians will save us regardless of the party. Look, we're the Sierra Club. That means we get mad at everyone when they're not doing their jobs, which I think is fundamentally the floor. The floor is protecting people from pollution. It is making sure that you can promote opportunity for everyone, regardless of what they look like or where they live. That's the floor, not something we should have to negotiate our way up to. But it's very difficult to do that if we just rely on politicians. So it's important you have groups like yours who are, who are there, who aren't being paid to be there to be on behalf of a special interest, but for people. And it's important for your members, your volunteers, your supporter base to actually believe that they have to be their own champion because we're up against an infinitely funded opponent in this. Big tech is trillion-dollar agencies, trillion-dollar revenues. They can absolutely afford to make these things a lot safer, quieter, and more energy efficient, but they just don't want to because, having $1 trillion is not enough. So that's what we're up against. That said, it's still a democratic system. So when they see public opposition, as you've seen in Virginia, like just because we didn't pass anything doesn't mean this wasn't a good doesn't mean there wasn't a success and a victory in this. The fact that we have a slew of bipartisan bills being pushed and it's going to be pushed next year and the year after that, that is a huge step forward. So I don't say these things as a discouragement that we didn't pass anything. I say them as like a call to action. We're getting traction on these things, but it's always going to be hard, but all we can do is try. That's the whole point of this is just to try.
Man, yeah, thank you so much. That was incredible and so powerful. And I know there's just been a few that have been proposed here in Iowa, and I know that we're really keeping our eye on it. And
Yeah.
especially having the aquifer, and our water permit system, that's a whole topic in itself. Um, and so we're really keeping our eye on it. But just having this insight from a state and somebody that's really like boots on the ground into it is so helpful. And we can't thank you enough for everything you're doing in Virginia and that we can hopefully follow your lead and kind of get some things passed before things get really bad here. So yeah.
Well, thanks for saying that. And it's also I just want to make the point that like one of the best things you can do is get involved in the local level. I'll oftentimes actually something called Data Center Watch. It's an industry publication. They just got mad at us on their most recent report saying the Sierra Club is responsible for blocking or preventing or halting $86 billion worth of investments, which whatever the hell that means. No one like I don't know where they got that number. It's magical. But they've said we've been extremely successful on the local level. Like I'm all about state level stuff. I work at the state level chapter. But if you see something like this or even whispers about this, the playbook's probably similar across the United States. You'll hear about it 2 weeks before there's a decision about it, even though this is a massive project. We've just done this in Charles City County here in Virginia. They heard about it 2 weeks before the Planning Commission was going to do it. Their vote was last night. We've released a video of all those people talking about their concerns. It's on our Instagram, shameless plug, VA Sierra Club on Instagram or VA Sierra Club on Facebook. You can see kind of a lot more about these things. Um, and they've been actually pretty good about either preventing or blocking certain data centers from being developed. The practices of these, I didn't want to get too much because I want to make sure you all have your time with the pipelines bill and all that stuff. But there's a lot of different tactics that we've been able to develop in Virginia that have been very successful. So if anyone needs anything from us, please, I'm happy to give my information. Well, you all have my information to share with anyone who's fighting this and give our insights. We're doing our best we can, and it's just funny that an entire publication of a Lex Luthor level corporation is getting mad at like 3 people in Virginia for doing this work. It shows you how powerful we can be. They're a little bit of a defense, but 3 people doing this full time with a bunch of communities who are saying enough is enough. We don't want this is enough to get under the skin of powerful special interests, and that alone I think is worth it. So if there's anyone else, whoever has those things, I'm happy to provide any insight or help that we can. This is very much a David and Goliath story, but David's supposed to win.
Well, thank you so much. And is it okay if I share your email in the chat and everything?
Please, please,
Okay,
yep,
perfect.
happy to.
I'll share that in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, feel free again to throw them in the chat or the comments later, and we'll be sure to get those answered and over to Tim. But I want to thank you so much again. Your passion really comes through, and I just can't appreciate and let you know that how important your work is, and thank you enough. So,
Well, we're huge fans of yours as well. Virginia's Sierra Club's like, yeah, we need to do more things like the Iowa chapter. So we're all in
we're
this together,
team.
but we appreciate everything
Yes,
you're doing.
yes. Grassroots. I love it. Well, thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us. Have a fantastic weekend. Happy Mother's Day, and we'll see you all next Friday.
Thanks again.